What if the very first 10 minutes of Avengers Doomsday already tell us how the story is going to end? And what if the Avengers' biggest mistake is hidden right there in plain sight? In this video, I'm breaking down two massive things. First, how the opening scene and first 10 minutes of Avengers Doomsday might unfold, setting the tone for everything that follows, and then diving deep into the darkest twist of the movie, the one decision that turns the Avengers from heroes into something far more dangerous. Let's discuss the first topic. How do you open a movie when the story you are about to tell is not about saving the world, but about realizing it already ended? I kept thinking about that question because Avengers Doomsday cannot begin with hope, jokes, or hero landings. It has to begin with loss. I imagine the first image is silence, the kind that feels wrong, like the universe itself is holding its breath. The camera drifts through a shattered multiverse where time is folding in on itself, collapsing like broken glass, falling inward. I noticed how important it is that this chaos is not loud. There is no music at first, no dialogue, just echoes of reality tearing apart. Then the shot settles on a dead Earth, burned, cracked, and abandoned. This is not some random timeline. This is a place that mattered. As the camera moves closer, I see symbols half buried in ash, shattered and forgotten. Captain America's shield split down the center. Iron Man's arc reactor dark and cold. Thor's hammer broken like stone. These aren't Easter eggs, they're gravestones. In those first moments, the movie quietly tells us the Avengers failed here, and whatever comes next isn't about preventing disaster. It's about understanding how everything slipped past the point of saving. And that realization alone is enough to make the audience uneasy before a single villain ever steps into frame. Because the ending has already happened, and the movie is brave enough to admit it, right from the start, alone. After that devastating image, I think the camera pulls us deeper into the ruins, not to show scale, but to show consequence. Time starts behaving strangely. Dust rises, then freezes midair. Lightning cracks, then rewinds back into the clouds. I started connecting the dots here, because this isn't just visual spectacle. It's the language of a multiverse breaking. This opening wants us to feel that time itself is wounded. That's when the ground begins to tremble. Not from footsteps, but from something awakening beneath reality. Ancient machinery, older than the Avengers, older than most gods we've seen, hums to life. Symbols glow with a sickly green and burning orange energy, suggesting science fused with forbidden magic. And standing at the center of it all is Dr. Doom. Not rushing, not screaming, just calm, controlled. I noticed how powerful that choice is. Doom doesn't arrive with explosions. He's already been here. He's been waiting. His armor is scarred, not polished, telling us he's survived things we haven't witnessed yet. As he places his hands on the machine, the multiverse reacts like a living thing in pain. Doom isn't destroying reality. He's editing it. And that distinction matters. Right away, the movie positions him not as a monster craving chaos, but as an architect who believes the current design has failed. That belief makes him terrifying because he truly thinks he's right. And in those seconds, the audience realizes this story will challenge every heroic assumption we carry with us. Forward, now. Then comes the moment that changes the entire emotional weight of the opening. A voice echoes across the broken sky, calm, familiar, and deeply unsettling. I noticed how the movie doesn't reveal the speaker immediately. Instead, it lets the words hang in the air. Avengers. You were late. That single line carries more history than any exposition dump ever could. I started thinking about who this voice belongs to and why it matters. It doesn't sound angry. It sounds disappointed, like someone who expected heroes to arrive and waited longer than anyone should have. This implies something terrifying. Somewhere at some point the Avengers knew about this collapse. They tried to stop it, and they failed. The voice feels like a ghost speaking from the aftermath of their loss. As the camera cuts through fragmented memories, I imagine we see flashes, battles we never saw, sacrifices that didn't matter, timelines folding into nothing. The movie refuses to explain it all, and that's intentional. Confusion is part of the horror. We are meant to feel what the Avengers felt when they realized they were running out of time. By opening with aftermath instead of action, the film tells us this story isn't about how powerful the heroes are. It's about what happens when power isn't enough, and even legends can arrive too late to change fate. And that emotional promise hooks the audience harder than any explosion ever could. In those opening minutes alone, setting the tone permanently for everyone watching. At this point, I think the opening shifts perspective just enough to show us the cost of Doom's actions on a cosmic level. Reality glitches. Entire cities flicker between existence and erasure. Oceans drain upward into the sky, reversing gravity as if the universe forgot its own rules. I noticed how this chaos feels deliberate, not random. Doom's machine isn't malfunctioning. It's working exactly as intended. This is crucial, because it frames Doom as someone who understands the multiverse better than the heroes ever did. He isn't guessing. He calculated this outcome. As fragments of different timelines bleed together, we might glimpse alternate Avengers, broken versions of familiar faces, all failing in slightly different ways. These flashes aren't cameos for hype. They're warnings. They show us that across infinite realities, the same mistake keeps happening. Heroes react. Doom plans. That difference explains why he's winning. I started connecting this to the larger theme of the movie. Doomsday isn't about good versus evil. It's about preparation versus desperation. Doom represents someone who looked at the multiverse and decided hope wasn't a strategy anymore. The Avengers, by contrast, have always relied on last-minute miracles. This opening scene quietly argues that miracles have expiration dates. When the multiverse begins to collapse, belief alone cannot hold it together. And that idea changes how we're meant to view every heroic choice that follows, from that moment onward, without ever saying it out loud. Letting the visuals do the talking, instead of dialogue. Alone now. I imagine the opening 10 minutes ending with a moment of stillness that feels almost cruel. Doom steps back from the machine, satisfied, while the universe continues to unravel behind him. I noticed how important it is that he doesn't celebrate. There's no victory pose, no evil laughter, just acceptance. This tells me Doom isn't trying to rule the multiverse for ego. He's trying to control it, because he believes chaos is worse than tyranny. As reality fractures further, the camera lingers on that dead Earth one last time, reinforcing that this outcome is real, permanent, and already paid for in blood. I started thinking about how bold it is to open a Marvel movie like this. No heroes, no banter, just consequences. That choice immediately signals that Doomsday is playing a different game. This isn't about assembling a team. It's about questioning whether teams even work anymore. When the screen finally cuts to black, the audience isn't excited. They're unsettled. And that's exactly the point. The opening doesn't ask us to cheer. It asks us to reflect. What happens when the people we trust to save us are outmatched by someone who prepared longer, thought harder, and was willing to make impossible choices? That question lingers as the title appears, heavy and ominous. By the time the movie truly begins, we already know the stakes. Not just the end of a world, but the collapse of the idea that heroes always arrive in time, when everything matters most. Again. Looking at this opening as a whole, I think it functions like a warning disguised as a prologue. It tells us the rules have changed before we even meet the characters we love. I noticed how the absence of the Avengers is louder than their presence ever was. Their failure hangs over every frame like a shadow. This makes their eventual return feel earned rather than guaranteed. I started connecting this to the emotional journey the audience will go through. We aren't being invited to watch heroes win. We're being invited to watch them struggle with guilt, doubt, and the terrifying possibility that Doom might be right. By establishing Doom as calm, patient, and terrifyingly logical, the movie forces us to confront uncomfortable questions. What if control is the only way to save what's left? What if freedom is what doomed the multiverse in the first place? These ideas simmer beneath the visuals, making the opening 10 minutes feel heavier than most full movies. There's also a sense of inevitability baked into every shot. Time isn't just collapsing, it's accusing. Every rewind and glitch feels like the universe replaying mistakes over and over. When the heroes finally appear later, they won't be stepping into a fight. They'll be stepping into a crime scene. And that shift changes everything. This opening doesn't just start the movie. It redefines what an Avengers story can be when the end has already begun, before anyone realizes what's coming. For them at all. Anymore now. I also think this opening scene is designed to reframe Doctor Doom as the true center of the story. Not as a reaction to the Avengers, but as the cause of their awakening. I noticed how everything revolves around his choices, not their heroics. That's a massive shift for the franchise. Doom isn't chasing the Avengers. He's already moved past them. That tells us the conflict won't be about stopping Doom from starting something. It will be about undoing what he's already done. And that's a much harder task. I started thinking about how emotionally devastating that is. The heroes won't be racing against time. They'll be racing against permanence. Every decision they make will come with the risk of making things worse. The opening makes it clear that this machine can rewrite time and reality, but rewriting doesn't mean fixing. It means choosing what survives and what gets erased. Doom understands that cost, and he's willing to pay it. The Avengers, historically, are not. This sets up a philosophical clash rather than a simple battle. Power versus responsibility. Control versus chaos. Acceptance versus hope. The opening 10 minutes don't explain this outright, but they plant the seeds. By the time the story unfolds, we'll realize that Doomsday isn't asking who can punch harder. It's asking who is willing to live with the consequences of saving a broken universe, even if it means losing everything else they once thought defined them as heroes and saviors forever in this story. Now, what really fascinates me is how this opening uses absence as its strongest weapon. We don't see the Avengers, but we feel them everywhere. I noticed how the broken symbols act like silent accusations, asking where the heroes were when this happened. This choice pulls the audience into a position of doubt. We trust these characters, but the opening forces us to question that trust. I started thinking about how powerful that is for longtime fans. We've watched these heroes save the day again and again. Seeing proof that they failed hits harder than watching them lose a fight. Failure implies responsibility, and responsibility implies blame. The opening doesn't tell us who is at fault, but it invites us to wonder. Was it arrogance? Was it hesitation? Or was Doom simply smarter? By refusing to answer these questions immediately, the movie keeps us engaged. We aren't just watching a story, we're investigating it. Every frame feels like evidence. The broken multiverse isn't just spectacle, it's a mystery. And mysteries are what keep audiences leaning forward. This opening teaches us how to watch the rest of the film. Pay attention. Nothing is random. Every choice, every silence, every ruined world means something. The movie demands patience and curiosity, rewarding viewers who look beyond surface-level action and listen to what the universe itself is trying to say, before revealing its final truth about survival, sacrifice, and control. In a collapsing reality that refuses simple answers for anyone involved, ever again. As the opening transitions into the rest of the movie, I think its greatest achievement is emotional alignment. The audience feels what the characters will feel before they even appear. Dread, regret, fear. I noticed how this primes us for a story that won't offer easy victories. Every success will feel temporary. Every loss will feel permanent. That emotional groundwork is essential for a film dealing with multiversal collapse. Without it, the scale becomes meaningless. I started connecting this to why the opening focuses so heavily on Doom instead of the Avengers. Doom represents certainty. The Avengers represent uncertainty. In a dying multiverse, certainty is seductive. The opening wants us to understand why someone might choose Doom's path even if we don't agree with it. That moral tension is what elevates the story. When the heroes finally challenge Doom, it won't just be a physical confrontation. It will be a clash of philosophies shaped by this opening moment. Hope versus control. Faith versus calculation. The first 10 minutes quietly framed the entire debate. By the time the credits roll at the end of the movie, we'll look back at this opening and realize it told us everything we needed to know. Not through exposition, but through atmosphere, imagery, and the haunting realization that sometimes the end doesn't announce itself. It simply arrives, leaving us to deal with the consequences. Whether we're ready or not, in stories like this, about heroes and villains and broken worlds on a cosmic scale. Alone. When I imagine watching this opening in a theater, I can already feel the silence in the room. That kind of silence only happens when a movie has complete control over its audience. I think that's the true goal of Avengers Doomsday's opening scene. Not shock, not spectacle, but control. By showing us a world already lost, a villain already winning, and heroes already too late, the movie earns our attention in a way few blockbusters dare to try. Everything that follows will feel heavier because of these first 10 minutes. Every joke will feel fragile. Every victory will feel borrowed. And every sacrifice will feel necessary. I noticed how this opening doesn't just set up a plot. It sets up a feeling that stays with you long after the screen goes dark. That's powerful storytelling. It respects the audience enough to challenge them emotionally before entertaining them. And if this really is how the movie begins, then Doomsday won't just be another Avengers film. It will be a meditation on endings, choices, and the terrifying responsibility of deciding what deserves to exist. Now, let's move into our next topic, or next title. Is it possible that the Avengers didn't lose the multiverse because they were too weak, but because they made the one choice heroes are never supposed to make? I noticed something unsettling the moment I started connecting the dots between Doom's rise and the Avengers' most desperate victory. This isn't a story about explosions or final battles. It's about a decision that quietly rewrote what it even means to be a hero. Somewhere in the chaos of collapsing timelines, the Avengers were forced into a corner where every option was wrong. They weren't choosing between good and evil anymore. They were choosing which evil they could live with. And that's where everything fractures. I think this movie hides its darkest truth in silence, in the moments where nobody celebrates. The camera doesn't linger on the dead world, but its absence haunts every scene that follows. I break this down not as a fan cheering for the Avengers, but as someone watching heroes slowly become judges, deciding who deserves to exist and who doesn't, all in the name of survival. At first, the choice feels logical, almost inevitable. Doom isn't just another villain punching through buildings. He's an idea that spreads across realities, a presence that feeds on hesitation. The Avengers realize that if even one version of him stabilizes, the multiverse starts folding inward. Entire realities begin crashing like dominoes. I noticed how the film frames this discovery like a ticking clock, not a moral debate. There's no time to save everyone, no clever loophole waiting to be found. A single timeline becomes the keystone holding everything else apart. Millions of innocent lives, normal people with ordinary dreams, suddenly reduced to numbers on a cosmic scale. The Avengers convince themselves that sacrificing one world to save infinite others is the only rational move. But rational doesn't mean right, and that difference is where the story quietly turns cruel. What makes this decision truly horrifying is how calm it is. There's no screaming argument, no dramatic vote. The team stands there, exhausted, calculating probabilities instead of consequences. I noticed how the music drops out in this scene, leaving only breathing and distant alarms. That silence tells us everything. This isn't heroism fueled by hope. It's heroism stripped down to survival math. Someone mentions that they can't save everyone. Someone else responds that they were never supposed to. That single line cuts deeper than any villain monologue. In that moment, the Avengers cross an invisible line. They stop fighting for life and start managing death. They don't pull the trigger with anger or hate. They do it with resignation. And somehow, that makes it worse. The timeline they erase isn't evil or corrupted. It's painfully normal. I think that's intentional. We see flashes of children running to school, families arguing over dinner, people planning futures they'll never reach. The movie doesn't dwell on them for long, but it shows just enough to make the loss feel personal. I started realizing that this is the point. If the sacrificed world were already doomed or morally compromised, the choice would feel justified. But it isn't. It's innocent. That's the weight the Avengers carry forward, even if they never say it out loud. They save the multiverse, but they do it by quietly agreeing that some lives matter less than others when the numbers get big enough. Doom understands this better than anyone. That's what makes him terrifying. He doesn't scream about revenge or domination. He presents evidence. I noticed how he never calls the Avengers monsters. He calls them consistent. In his eyes, they've proven his entire philosophy. When faced with chaos, they will always choose the lesser evil, even if it means becoming one themselves. Doom doesn't need to destroy worlds anymore. He just needs to remind the Avengers of what they already did. Every time they try to stop him, he reframes their actions as hypocrisy. Why is his judgment wrong, he asks, when theirs erased an entire reality? The question lingers, unanswered, and that's exactly his power. The emotional backbone of the movie isn't the multiverse collapsing. It's the guilt that follows the Avengers like a shadow. I noticed how victories feel hollow after the sacrifice. Jokes don't land the same way. Trust fractures in subtle glances and unfinished sentences. Some members believe the choice was necessary. Others can barely look at themselves. The team is still together, but something vital is missing. They saved existence, yet lost their moral center. I think the film wants us to sit in that discomfort. There's no clean redemption arc waiting around the corner. The damage isn't external. It's internal, and it doesn't heal with time. One scene that stayed with me shows an Avenger staring at a star map, knowing one of those points no longer exists because of them. There's no dialogue, just quiet devastation. I started connecting this to Doom's strategy. He doesn't attack their strength. He attacks their certainty. Every time they hesitate, every time they question whether they deserve to win, Doom gains ground. He becomes less a villain and more a mirror, reflecting the cost of their survival. The Avengers can punch him, outsmart him, even temporarily defeat him, but they can't undo the truth he represents. That's why he keeps coming back. What's brilliant about this twist is that it doesn't ask whether the Avengers were wrong. It asks whether being right is enough. I noticed how the film avoids giving us a clear answer. The universe survives, but at a price so high it reshapes the meaning of heroism. The Avengers become guardians of existence, but also its executioners. That dual role is impossible to reconcile. Doom thrives in that contradiction. He isn't trying to end the multiverse. He's trying to expose the lie at its center, that heroes can make impossible choices and remain pure. The movie suggests they can't, and that realization changes everything. As the story moves toward its end, the sacrifice stops being a secret. Fragments of the truth leak out across realities. Survivors from broken timelines whisper about the world that vanished without a trace. I think this is where the Avengers' greatest mistake fully reveals itself. They believed the act would end with them, that they alone would carry the burden. But moral choices at a cosmic scale don't stay contained. They ripple outward, warping how every reality views them. Heroes become feared. Salvation starts to look like tyranny. Doom doesn't create this fear. He simply points to it and lets it grow. In the final confrontation, Doom doesn't demand surrender. He demands acknowledgement. He wants the Avengers to admit that the line between hero and villain isn't drawn by intention, but by consequence. I noticed how quiet this climax is compared to typical finales. No city-leveling spectacle, just words landing heavier than punches. The Avengers realize that defeating Doom won't erase what they've done. Even if they win, the multiverse will remember the day its saviors chose to erase a world. That's the true Doomsday. Not destruction, but doubt. I think the darkest twist of all is that Doom might be right, at least in part. The Avengers didn't fail because they chose wrong. They failed because they believed they could make a God-level decision and remain human afterward. That belief shattered along with the sacrifice timeline. The movie leaves us with an unsettling question. If survival requires becoming something colder, something more calculating, is survival still worth it? I break this down because it forces us to rethink what we ask of heroes. Maybe the real danger isn't villains like Doom, but the moment we accept that some lives are expendable for the greater good. I noticed how each Avenger processes the aftermath differently, and that diversity of guilt is crucial. One tries to rationalize it through numbers, repeating the logic like a prayer, as if math can absolve murder. Another withdraws completely, choosing isolation over leadership because every command now feels like a potential death sentence. There's anger too, not at Doom but at themselves for agreeing so quickly. I think the film uses these reactions to show that the team didn't just lose a timeline, they lost a shared identity. They can no longer agree on what saving the world actually means. That fracture makes them vulnerable in ways no external enemy ever could. The visual language reinforces this shift. After the sacrifice, colors drain subtly from the film. I noticed how skies look duller, how familiar locations feel slightly off, like reality itself is mourning. Even action scenes feel restrained, less triumphant. Victories come with collateral damage that the camera refuses to ignore. Civilians look at the Avengers with confusion instead of gratitude, some even with fear. The film never spells it out, but the message is clear. Once you decide some lives are acceptable losses, you can't control who decides next. Authority built on sacrifice invites resistance. Doom exploits this erosion of trust masterfully. He appears not as a conqueror, but as an alternative. I noticed how he speaks to fractured worlds with empathy, acknowledging their fear instead of dismissing it. He presents himself as someone honest about the cost of order. Where the Avengers promise protection without guarantees, Doom promises clarity, even if it's brutal. That's why his message spreads. He doesn't need to lie. The Avengers already proved his point. In choosing the lesser evil, they legitimize the idea that moral purity is a luxury the universe can't afford. There's a haunting sequence where the Avengers attempt to undo their choice, not by time travel, but by understanding. They search records of the erased timeline, piecing together lives that no longer exist. I noticed how this investigation feels like a crime scene analysis, except they're both detectives and perpetrators. Each discovery deepens the wound. A scientist who would have cured a disease, an artist who would have inspired millions. Futures that mattered, extinguished without resistance. The film forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that potential is invisible until it's gone. This is where the story's tension peaks, not with explosions, but with accountability. I think the Avengers realized that saving the multiverse didn't make them heroes. It made them responsible for everything that follows. Doom becomes the embodiment of that responsibility turned outward. He challenges them to stop pretending they're different from him. Both sides are willing to sacrifice for order. The only difference is presentation. Capes versus armor. Hopeful speeches versus cold honesty. The line blurs until it's almost impossible to see. By the time the Avengers face Doom again, the fight feels symbolic. Every blow is loaded with doubt. I noticed how teamwork falters, how hesitation costs them ground. They're no longer united by belief, only by habit. Doom calls this out directly, accusing them of fighting not to save others, but to escape their own guilt. That accusation lands because part of it is true. The Avengers aren't just defending reality. They're defending the story they tell themselves about who they are. The film's refusal to offer an easy answer is what makes it resonate. There's no magical reversal, no hidden timeline restored. The sacrificed world stays gone. I think that permanence is the point. Choices at this scale aren't meant to be undone. They're meant to be lived with. The Avengers survive, but they carry a scar that defines them more than any victory. Doom doesn't win, but neither do they. The universe continues, balanced on a compromise that will never feel clean. In the final moments, I noticed a quiet shift. The Avengers stop arguing about whether the decision was right. They start asking how to prevent ever making it again. It's a subtle but powerful change. Instead of positioning themselves as ultimate arbiters, they begin exploring limits, safeguards, ways to decentralize power. It's not redemption, but it's growth. The film suggests that true heroism might not be about making impossible choices, but about refusing systems that demand them in the first place. That idea reframes the entire story. The darkest twist isn't the destroyed timeline. It's the realization that the Avengers' greatest enemy was never Doom. It was the belief that someone has to decide who lives and who doesn't. By accepting that role, they stepped into a trap centuries old. Doom just gave it a face. I break this down because it challenges the fantasy of absolute heroism. It asks us to sit with ambiguity, to accept that some victories cost too much, even if the universe keeps spinning afterward. That's why this story doesn't end with closure. It ends with responsibility. The Avengers remain not as symbols of unquestioned good, but as reminders of how fragile morality becomes under pressure. And maybe that discomfort is exactly what the multiverse needs to survive. I noticed that when the screen finally fades to black, there's no triumphant score. Only a low, unresolved note that feels more like a question than an ending. That sound lingers, asking us what we would have done in their place, and whether we would judge the Avengers differently if the outcome had gone the other way. I think that's the film's quiet challenge to the audience. It doesn't want admiration or outrage. It wants reflection. Because in a universe big enough, every choice eventually becomes someone else's tragedy. The Avengers learned that the hard way, and the multiverse will never forget it. What stays with me is how small the heroes look in those final frames, not diminished, but human, finally aware that power without restraint leads to the same darkness they once fought against. This awareness doesn't fix anything overnight, but it plants the seed of something more honest. Responsibility instead of righteousness. Caution instead of certainty. That shift is subtle, almost fragile, but it might be the only hope left. It suggests that the future of heroism isn't about winning every battle, but about refusing to repeat the same mistakes when the pressure returns, when the easy option tempts them again, and when sacrifice feels efficient, clean, justified by numbers alone, and dangerously comforting. It also warns that the moment heroes stop questioning themselves, they become stories told by survivors instead of protectors remembered with gratitude, and that legacy, once set, can outlive empires, outlast victories, and redefine morality for generations who never saw the original sacrifice long after the last battle fades into myth and rumor across fractured timelines and haunted memories of countless beings together. If you felt that way too, make sure to like the video, share it with someone who loves these deep dives, and subscribe for more breakdowns like this.